Hey, good morning, everybody. Today is just a special day. I get to record one of my favorite people that I am following. My name's Stu Turley, President and CEO of the Sandstone Group, and this is a Energy Newsbeat special. I'm here to visit with Tom Kirkman. Tom is a industry thought leader, and I have been following him in all of his antics on LinkedIn for a very long time. Thank you, Tom, for stopping by the podcast today.
Thank you, Stu. This should be fun. As we did our pre-game show chats, nothing is off the table. I will try and behave, but let's have a lively conversation. And we don't know where this is going to end up, but this should be fun.
Oh, absolutely. But we were talking about some of the things going on around the world, and I really think, Tom, there is two different layers, and we're just going to jump right on this. Anybody that doesn't know you on LinkedIn should, and I think everybody needs to follow you. And you and I were talking back and forth on some of this. And I'm going to bring up your oil price. You told me about this in your thing. You've done a lot of writing. And Tom, how many are you going to go over? How many millions that you're going to go over this year? What's your target?
Oh, I'm currently in the last 365 days on LinkedIn, 2.75 million. So my target for this year in the space of 365 is I'd like to break 3 million views. I write a lot. 3 million
views. Oh,
so
man.
I've written about 30,000 comments in the last decade, 8,000 on Oil Pro Forum when I was a volunteer moderator there, 8,000 on the Oil Price Forum when I was a moderator there, and well over 10,000 on LinkedIn in the last decade. I lose track. I can't keep track anymore.
Wow.
But I try
I'm
and
not
write every
ready
day.
to hang with you. But we'll just kind of like keep going on. But your comments and I don't know how you do it, but it's like when you get everybody all riled up, you calmly speak the truth. and then it just polarizes people. And you had a prediction in oil price. Don't sneeze. Corvinus is a threat to oil markets and global economies. There's 37 pages or 5 million comments in this thing, and they were a hoot. Tell us about that one, and how did that prediction work out for you?
It went well. I can actually read what I wrote, and I just loved the first comments. This was back in January 24th, 2020, a day before Chinese New Year, and this is before coronavirus had exited China, and it hadn't really reached the media in the United States. And here's three little paragraphs that I wrote. So just before Chinese New Year on the 25th, it looks like coronavirus emanating from China is going to cause multiform, intertwined havoc globally. Health, markets, energy demand, travel plans, economy, all going to get whacked. Starting in China already. How hard the whacks will be remain to be seen, but whacks are already being dished out. Let's see how far the health problems spread globally by next week, along with a resultant knockdown on all sorts of other economic and energy factors. So again, nobody in the US had even heard of coronavirus yet. And it's like, I'm going with this and I'm going, wow, what's going on in China? And the beginning of the first two comments is, this is such utter bullshit. Excuse my language. The next one was utter claptrap clickbait BS. So sometimes I make predictions about global oil and gas and the economy because they're all intertwined. And a lot of people don't like what I read or what I write. I have no issue with that. It's just my opinion. And my tagline as a moderator on Oil Pro Forum, which used to have 1 million registered members. It used to be called the LinkedIn of oil and gas industry before it got closed down by a competing zone, rig zone. It was a huge legal mess. But my tagline as a moderator was just my opinion. As always, you are free to disagree. And that undermines a lot of trolls right there, because there's so much trolling online, and I can dig in and I can do trolling myself, but it's like, yeah, let's not fight over petty things. Let's have rational debates. And it's like, I don't mind people disagreeing with me. I expect it. Right. Just don't call me a Nazi. Don't call me all these other names, because it's like, yeah, I'm sorry. That's not rational debate.
I want to, Tom, both you and I, we were kind of teasing back and forth before we go here. Both of us are old enough, I could care less what people think about me. and you said, yeah, but we both got gray hair. And I'm like, hey, that's mean. Mine's flesh colored, and I'm a little jealous of anybody at my age having hair. So anyway, this was really cool. And your predictions, as you go through, and we've lived long enough that we can kind of see these things. Tom, let me drill in on this one thing. And that is, so many people think pricing oil and gas is just a simple supply and demand. And it is not anymore. I mean, it always wasn't, but now you got geopolitical, you've got politics, you've got the windmill crew. I mean,
Whales dying,
the grand
all
home
sorts of stuff.
effect. I mean, my goodness, how do you put all this kind of stuff into the pricing mold? And if you don't consider any of those kind of things out there, it's almost a mess to even try to think about pricing.
I give up trying to even forecast any type of pricing anymore, because there's so many unknown variables and unknown unknowns besides all the obvious politics. I mean, blowing up Nord Stream gas pipeline,
Right.
that's going to have a huge knockdown effect for a long time, and no, Russia's not going to rebuild it because it'll just get blown up again. They would be stupid to try and rebuild it.
Right.
So let's morph into what I wrote about on LinkedIn this morning. I was just flabbergasted when I saw this. And one of my favorite writers is Sundance on Conservative Treehouse. And it's like, he's posted that there were 3 separate oil refinery fires in Mexico yesterday in one day. In one day. And it's like, okay, so here's my take on this. And here's kind of my prediction after I get out of whatever I'm going to say here. So Nord Stream pipeline, I've got my views on who probably was behind it, not necessarily who actually did it, but who was the driving force behind it. I'm not going to get into it. It should be obvious to anyone with a brain. But there was zero consequences to Nord Stream pipeline getting blown up by the people who did it.
Right.
The United Nations refuses to discuss this, and a lot of European nations thrown in the towel, and they do not want the United Nations to actually do an investigation of who blew up the Nord Stream gas pipelines, which is actually an act of war. So
exactly,
there is zero punishment, zero consequences to blowing up a natural gas pipeline, and it has international consequences. That means fair game on oil and gas infrastructure. We've seen smaller stuff like this before in the past, especially in Africa, siphoning off energy and some pipelines getting blown up a little bit and stuff like that. But now what I see is we're moving into a kinetic warfare between the green revolution and hydrocarbons plus nuclear. I'm not a huge nuclear fan, but it's like, I have to be realistic. We need it because wind and solar is just not cutting it. So I have repeatedly called it, in my view, the Biden administration's war on domestic oil and gas. And you can see it with, Keystone XL pipeline getting canceled the first day in office, permits being revoked, permits for expansion of refineries, permits for expansion of oil and gas facilities, oil and gas drilling and offshore drilling. All of this is being denied and curtailed and basically being made as difficult as possible. Biden administration didn't even have a federal oil lease, which is actually demanded by Congress once a year, and it just drifted off. They're doing everything in their power to kill off domestic oil and gas by 1,000 cuts of policies detrimental to domestic oil and gas. Foreign oil and gas is fine. Venezuela, for example, it's like, really? So they're ignoring Canadian oil and gas, and Trudeau doesn't want to ship it out anyway. And Biden is stomping on U.S. domestic oil and gas producers, making it as difficult as possible while proclaiming, oh, you guys are, hoarding profits and all this other nonsense. Well, he's the one causing this to happen. So now what's happening is the president of Mexico, 6 months ago, there's history to this, has stated in the Oval Office to Biden, he has no intention of reducing oil refinery activities. He wants the price of gasoline and diesel to go down significantly. And this was directly contrary to what the Biden administration has been trying to do, which is don't pay attention to what they're saying. Pay attention to what the Biden administration is actually doing. So the Biden administration, what they're doing is making gasoline and diesel more expensive by adding on additional policies and rules and regulations. And then loudly proclaiming, oh, it's oil and gas industry's fault for making excessive profits. And it's like, no, that's not it. So the president of Mexico made it very clear they are not going to go along with the green energy transition to wind and solar that the Biden administration is pushing so heavily with the Orwellian Inflation Reduction Act, which is the exact opposite of what it says. And so what's happening now, and the Sundance, the writer, the pen name of the writer of the Conservative Treehouse Forum, said, watch what happens to Mexican oil and gas in 2023. So 6 months later, what's happening is 3 Pemex oil refineries in 3 different locations have fires on the same day. These are refineries. This is what processes crude oil to usable gasoline, usable diesel, airplane stuff. It reminds me of all well, let me put it this way. Put 2 and 2 together of Nord Stream pipeline. There were no repercussions. And now all of a sudden, this is obvious. 3 oil refinery fires at Pemex in Mexico on the same day is not an accident. I'm sorry, it's mathematically improbable. I won't say it's impossible, but it's like, come on, really? So my prediction is, if nothing happens to whoever or whatever caused these fires, because this can't possibly be accidental, it's just too coincidental. If nothing happens, more similar infrastructure will be sabotaged. I mean, you look at the guys that were, the people that were shooting transformer stations, electrical transformer stations, there was a rash of them in the United States over the last couple months, deliberately, repeatedly shooting transformer stations and causing these blackouts. It's almost like they're testing to see what will react, how the United States government will react to deliberate sabotage to the energy infrastructure. So with the Biden administration's very Orwellian and impossible, quote unquote, transition, there is no transition, it's not workable, away from hydrocarbons, and hydrocarbons is oil, gas, coal, and LNG. And also transitioning away from nuclear power plants, because I think 3 have been shut down in the last, I lose track because I don't pay attention to nuclear power plants as much as I do oil and gas. But they're reducing domestic oil and gas production. They're ignoring importing oil and gas from Canada, reaching out to Venezuela. Up until just a few months ago, New England was still importing oil from Russia before the sanctions. And so is California. California is an energy island. If you don't know what an energy island is, just Google these 3 words, California energy island. California deliberately is making it hard for, the government wants deliberately high prices in California for energy to try and force the initiative of moving everyone to electrified and electricity from predominantly solar and wind and some hydro. But the thing is, you can't build a whole bunch more hydro dams. You just can't. You can maybe build 1 or 2 more, but you can't build 1 million more hydro facilities. You just can't. So wind and solar cannot and will not work, because Germany has proved it over their last decade of investing enormous amounts of money into wind and solar, and it's not working. So the Biden administration is trying to force domestic US oil and gas to reduce energy and throw enormous amounts of money toward wind and solar in rent-seeking industries, which are going to destabilize the electrical grid. By definition, wind and solar are intermittent and they cannot be the primary power source. Coal can be, nuclear can be, natural gas can be. Those are reliable sources of energy. Wind and solar are not. They can never be baseline electrical power. Add in the push and mandates for everyone to buy EVs, electrical vehicles, and move away. This is a disaster waiting to happen. So my view, and a lot of people disagree with me on this, this is deliberate. This is not accidental. This is designed to create havoc in Western countries. And this goes hand in hand with, the Klaus Schwab craziness of, the Great Reset and the 4th Industrial Revolution and all of their nonsense. You can
Right.
see they're pushing people eating bugs and all this other nonsense. It's like, I'm sorry, I'm not going along with this. So all of this goes together. So anyway, sorry I'm rambling on so much, but here's
Oh,
what
no,
I see very firmly. There's going to be more kinetic sabotage and attacks against various oil and gas infrastructure. It can be refineries, it can be pipelines, because currently there's no real repercussions to whoever parties or whichever parties, and there's plural, are doing
right.
this.
Let me ask this, because you brought up about 17 times. You brought up
I'm sorry.
17 different questions, and I'm like, and I keep wanting to jump in on these, but let me back this up, because there was an article that came out 2 or 3 weeks ago on the Nord Stream from that Pulitzer. Yes. Wonderful article. I mean, it was like, here's Norway. They stopped off in Norway. Here's how it all went in and
Yep.
everything else. And it was really laying out the potential that the Biden administration did it. And then he even alluded that he was going to say, well, it's going to get taken out even early on. I mean, that's his words, not mine. But I thought that was a fabulous article.
He had a follow-up, a YouTube interview yesterday. If you haven't seen
You
it,
what?
I haven't seen it yet. Yeah, so find it. He has a half-hour YouTube. Seymour Hirsch has a
Yes.
half-hour video interview, which came out yesterday, I believe. I have not been able to see it yet. I've been running around like crazy.
It's
I
probably already
will. I
taken
plan to
down.
see it this weekend, and I'm sure there's some more updates on that. But what he wrote is plausible. I do get concerned about his reliable source. I get suspicious of anonymous sources because it reminds me of the whole Iraq war nonsense of weapons of mass destruction. It's like, I get,
Right.
But on the other hand, this guy is putting his life's reputation on the line for all of the things he's been writing about for the last 50 years. And I seriously doubt he's going to damage his impeccable reputation by posting complete and utter nonsense.
I'm going to say it one step further, Tom. He's putting his life on the line.
Yeah, he's might get Epstein or Arkansas-ed, I know.
So as we sit here and we take a look at this, there's no doubt that if there are no repercussions, we're going to see these things happen more.
Yes.
That to me is just plain as day.
Logical.
And on this train thing, it's just boggles my mind. There's two things that you brought up. Biden killing the Keystone Pipeline. We need those heavy oil sands coming out to replace, any kind of imports. We wouldn't need Venezuelan oil if we could import Canadian oil.
Exactly.
Without the pipeline, we could get off rail cars coming in. Oh, rail cars have problems. They don't stay on the tracks. And in California, I think 90% or whatever the number is of their natural gas comes in from either imports from Canada or another. They have very limited resources, and then they bring in they buy 70 to 80% of the oil out of the rainforest.
Yes.
From China.
Yes. No, South America, not China. So again, Google, not Google. I don't trust Google. I use DuckDuckGo and Brave. Do an internet search for California Energy Island. It's a very specific phrase, and it'll explain why California will always have higher prices than the rest of the U.S. for their energy. It's a deliberate choice. They have pipelines from other states into California for both oil and gas. They're dependent on electricity from other states. They recently banned all oil and gas drilling in the Los Angeles basin, which used to be a huge oil and gas.
Yeah, Kern County is huge.
They're banning natural gas pipelines and natural gas in new buildings in various cities in California. They're making life very, very difficult and very, very expensive. So people will continue fleeing California.
Yep. Let me finish up on this next thing, because all of this is tying together. Tom, you've tied in about 6 pieces that I've been kind of scratching my scalp on. So if the trains are in this really big disaster in Ohio, they are looking at hauling by rail a lot of the polluted material and bringing it down to Texas, to Houston, to put in a saltwater disposal well. And I'm
There were
sitting here going,
1,700 tree derailments in the United States in the last year. 1,700. 1,700. The only ones that make the news are that, if there's some sort of disaster. Our infrastructure for bridges, roads, all sorts of infrastructure in the United States is decrepit and needs to be rebuilt. Our electrical grid, my opinion only, and I know a lot of people vehemently disagree, our electrical grid infrastructure is severely overloaded and we're not
yes,
keeping up. Electrical utility companies are trying to upgrade as fast as possible to make the existing transmission lines more, deliver more electrical power. The thing is, there's a shortage of what they call conductor. That's the copper wire. There's a shortage of transformers. Some of these transformers take 2 or more years to get. There's a shortage of electrical transformers. So these idiots that were literally shooting shotguns at electrical transformers in California and other states, deliberately trying to sabotage the electrical infrastructure, that's really, really bad news for the United States. So trains are not the way you want to transport oil or gas. Pipelines are by far the safest and most economical way to transport hydrocarbons over a long distance. So Russia has huge ones going directly into China, and they're building more. This gas that used to go from Russia to the European Union is going to eventually work its way into China and other countries that want this. It's just now it's going to cost more money because it's now grossly inefficient to make longer pipelines and send it by ship and by rail and all this other stuff. So Europeans are going to be paying significantly more for energy from here on out because they have made the deliberate choice that they do not want the cheap Russian oil, gas, coal. I don't know if you're aware that coal is blocked as well. LNG, which is blocked. So what's happening is for LNG in particular, Russia has been selling excess LNG to China, and China and India have been reselling it to the European Union at huge markups, sometimes 300% or 400%. And the European Union says, oh, this is not Russian, it's from China, it's from India, and we're fine with that. And it's like, you are making the deliberate choice with your sanctions to pay through the nose for energy, which you desperately need. And they're saying that the false narrative that, oh, we need to move away from hydrocarbons and move even faster toward solar and wind, that is a disaster waiting to happen because they are by definition intermittent and you're just asking for rolling power blackouts.
See, I love Irina. You and I were also talking about Irina back and forth. She is such a great lady. I love her opinions. And I just interviewed her this week. We have a monthly podcast, and she is such a hoot. And I love her phrase, sanctions don't work. And the only people that pay for the sanctions are the consumers. And Iran, for all these years, has figured out how to get around the sanctions. And then Putin was over there saying, oh, now I'm going to get sanctions. So he started going, well, this is how they got around it. And then Putin's working with Iran. So now they're working and they're notching the game up. The whole dark fleet is now coming forward and it's going around the whole thing. Tankers are being sold off to go to this dark fleet so that Russia and Iran and Iraq can all sell these things to India and China. What is that going to do for the whole mess, do you think?
This narrows in on one of my favorite topics, which is the decline of the petrodollar, and people get all annoyed. And it's like, look, guys, there's no way around this. There's no way around this. The petrodollar has been abused so much by sanctions, and I have been railing against energy sanctions for a very long time. The world needs more oil and gas, not less. There's just no way around this. And I give up even trying to argue with people who refuse to accept this basic premise. Wind and solar can add to hydrocarbons and nuclear. They cannot replace hydrocarbons and nuclear. And by hydrocarbons, again, that's oil, natural gas, LNG, and coal. So they can add to the mix. The world just continues on a regular basis for the last 100 years with the glitch during COVID for a year or two, continues to need ever increasing amounts of energy.
Right.
So there's no way of getting away from oil and gas. Now, right now, oil and gas, around 80% of the world's oil and gas is sold using the US dollar, also called, called petrodollars, around 80%. That is going to shift. What is going to happen within a couple years as BRICS Plus expands their economic clout and starts dealing in energy transactions and other commercial transactions without using the US dollar? It can be a gold-based currency. It can be an oil-based currency. I mean, you saw it happen to Gaddafi, but the thing is, China and Russia are not going to be intimidated or bullied that way. They're just not. So the US using economic sanctions brutally against so many countries they disagree with have got most of the rest of the world going, holy crap, I need to move away. And, you know, they seized, I forget how many billions of dollars from Russia in their, you know, their overseas bank accounts. They did the same thing to Venezuela, and they're looking at, okay, well, we need to start slowly divesting our, you know, central bank reserves of US dollars and start, you know, spreading it around a little bit, because we don't want our US dollars reserved in case the United States gets upset with us. So you've got the rise of BRICS, and BRICS are a nice countermeasure against the bulk of, you know, Klaus Schwab's insane World Economic Forum and his grandiose plans. That's going to fail massively. It's going to be fun to watch. But BRICS rising up, you are gonna see Saudi Arabia has already stated repeatedly their intention to join BRICS, and they are open. They've said this openly, to start selling oil in currencies other than US dollars. That once that happens, that is the end, the essential end of the petrodollar. It will go in a decline. Doesn't mean it'll go away, but the era of the United States being the reserve currency will start shifting. And I use a historical example. Look at the British pound sterling 100 years ago. Look at it 50 years ago. 50 years ago, 1 British pound sterling was equal to roughly $5 US. And over the course of the last 50 years, it has now come down to 1 British pound sterling is roughly equal to $1. It is no longer, it was for a long time, remember when Britain was, you know, the world's colonial master, and
that's exactly right.
It's no empire lasts forever. So the United States is printing trillions of dollars, and so are many other governments, printing trillions of dollars of fiat money, which has zero backing. The US dollar is no longer backed in gold, and just devaluing and watering down the existing US dollar. So what's happening is other countries around the world are starting to, Russia's starting to do this. They're trying to back the ruble using gold and oil. China is starting to do the same, and you start to see certain countries around the world massively buying up gold in preparation for moving away from the US dollar as the primary reserve currency. And it's going to happen slowly, because, you know, countries, China especially, has long-term plans. They think in decades, not, you know, Western governments and Western companies tend to live and die by quarterly and annually. It's like, no, guys, look out 10, 20, 30 years. So China is loath to have massive changes because they're worried about, you know, revolution by their people. And side note, with food shortages coming up, and so many United Nations, World Health Organization, World Economic Forum, Joe Biden, so many people have said there's food shortages coming. China's been stockpiling lots and lots of food, so they won't have a revolution due to lack of food. China knows from past experience, if you can't feed your people, the government gets overthrown. The US has not learned this lesson yet. With so many food processing plants, over 100 being destroyed in the United States within the last couple of years, it's insane. Anyway, I'm getting off topic here. So back to oil and gas. The US petrodollar, what I see is over the next couple of years, and I can't really give a time frame, but what's going to happen is there's going to be a shift from 80% US dollars being used to buy and sell oil globally. It'll shift to 70, 60, 50. At some point, only half or so of the world's oil will continue to be traded in US dollars, and BRICS Plus will probably be expanding this year with maybe Iran. I'm waiting for Saudi Arabia, a few more countries in Africa. I'll wait to see what happens. But as these countries start using currencies other than the US dollar for their internal trade with their growing economic bloc, the value of the US dollar as a global reserve currency will reduce. And I am not anti-US.
Right.
I've been all over the world. I've dealt with oil companies and engineering companies in 30 countries. I've
Right.
actually had pages added to my last passport because I've bounced all over the world. So
Nice.
I adore being back in the United States. My issue is not with the United States. The Constitution in the Bill of Rights is incredibly fantastic. It's unique in the history of the world.
Right.
My beef is not with the United States. My beef is with the current United States administration
Right.
that is causing chaos, reducing our freedoms, causing economic chaos, trying to shut down oil and gas, trying to impose
Wow.
totalitarian policies, the whole lockdowns and all this other stuff. I totally disagree with, and I believe I'm part of a silent majority. There are some people who are, very, very strongly for all of these lockdowns and mask mandates and all
Right.
this other crap. And it's like, I believe they're a minority. They're just very vocal about it.
I think
So
we're coming to a time that you're either going to quit being the silent majority, or you will not be able to ever speak it again. And
yep.
so I think that's my opinion. So we don't want you canceled.
I've learned over the years when I was writing, I was a volunteer moderator on Oil Price and Oil Pro for a while, just because I like writing, and being a moderator, especially when I was in a Southeast Asia country where you can literally get thrown in jail for writing bad, words that the government disagrees
Right.
with. You have to learn to dance around and allude to things, and you can say some fairly outrageous things as long as you avoid the third rail topics that are going to bite you hard and get you banned and censored.
Right.
So I've gotten used to over the years on LinkedIn. I gave you some of my tips before we started the recording here of how to avoid getting banned and censored. So these are useful tips. I don't really think this is the appropriate forum to discuss these, but it's important to speak truth in a way that is going to be acceptable to people. Doesn't mean you have to speak the whole truth. Doesn't mean you have to be a jerk about it. Doesn't mean you have to be up on a soapbox and yell and scream, because back in my punk rock days, that's what I used to do, yell and scream, and it turns people off. So I've learned not to do that. It's better to use humor, a little bit of sarcasm, mocking idiots. And there's a lot of idiots in government. It's like Mark Twain is like one of my favorite authors, back when. It's like, you just have to shake your head and roll your eyes at the idiotic comments that come out of our dear leaders. Kamala was just, it's like, I just read some of the stuff that she said yesterday, and it's like, really, boy, you are just, there's nothing between your ears. So there's no shortage of stuff to mock, and if you do it in a way that people can appreciate the amusement, then you can also slip in some stuff. So one of the things that I've stated very, very clearly for a very long time, I use the general topic of international oil and gas, plus all of the international politics that goes along with this, as a vehicle for throwing sand into our idiotic policies by governments around the world. I will openly poke fun of the stupid things that they're trying to implement. So trying to force people to buy electrical vehicles when the electrical grid is already overloaded, and you're trying to make the electrical grid even more intermittent and prone to blackouts by increasing solar and wind, is insanity, if you think about it. So anyway, I talk too much. So back over to you. I'm sort of wandering around here.
I'm just having, you and I have so many of the same opinions, and I just love the way you articulate them, Tom. So it is fun, and you've got to have humor. It's kind of like Irina and I have been banned by the UN, so I've got that going for me. If you get banned by the UN,
well done.
Yeah,
UN is a horrible organization.
Absolutely.
I want the United States out of the UN and UN out of the United States. Get them out of New York City.
I think they
get them out. They're horrible.
And then the only other claim to fame is that when I met Bill Gates, I made him so mad he couldn't see straight, and a vein came up across his forehead like this.
Well
That's
done.
if I can meet a politician or an unelected politician like he is and make him mad, I'm all in. So it means I've done my job. But Tom, we're running out of time, and I want you to have your last word here. Give us your last thoughts. What's going to happen for the balance of 2023? What do you think is going to go on?
Energy is going to be on a crazy roller coaster as usual, but it'll be probably a little bit worse than usual because European Union is not going to be able to restock their natural gas stockpiles this coming spring and summer, because last year they did it using mostly Russian natural gas, and that option is no longer there. So next winter, and the winter after that are probably going to be precarious for much of the EU. Wow. The other thing that I'm trying to highlight again and again and again, and I'm not going to let this go, I see more kinetic attacks against oil and gas infrastructure.
Right.
I don't know where, but since there's been essentially zero repercussions for these attacks, that's like the green light for this type of thing to continue going on for political reasons, for environmental reasons. The green war against oil and gas is going to escalate into kinetic warfare. I wish I was wrong. I really do.
I think you're dead on right. And I there was an article that came out of, it wasn't Norway, but it was, I'll have to think of it, yesterday or day before, that they were saying that the North Sea is also possibly under attack for the very same reason. And if you think about it, Tom, your articulation of it being that way is dead on right. We didn't cover one other thing.
Okay.
And that is the train. We did talk about the train coming back down in, and we're having to get it, the salt. And I think there's so many train derailments that an intentional train derailment would not even be noticed.
Well, one of the problems I have with this particular train derailment, there are so many suspicious parts to it. I'm not going to elaborate, but for example, blasting caps were found nearby. The train derailed directly on top of drainage areas. I'm not going to go out on a limb. I'm just going to say it raises some red flags.
Some questions.
And why is Biden refusing to go there? If you look at who owned the trains that derailed, BlackRock and the usual suspects, there's been mostly a mainstream media blackout about this. The EPA said the water is safe to drink, which is a load of hooey. It's really, I actually saw, and I wish I would have saved the screen cap, the EPA along with officials raising their glass of water and saying the water here in East Palestine, Ohio is safe to drink. And it's like, no, it's not, you idiots. Chickens are dying 10 miles away. I mean, just abruptly. So I get concerned of why this particular train, why this particular place, why this particular cargo, and why it's being so studiously ignored. And it's just a slap in the face to the people of East Palestine, Ohio, that instead of Biden going to East Palestine and sending huge amounts of aid, which was denied by 2 weeks by the federal government.
Right.
He went over to Ukraine, met with Zelensky, and promised, I believe, $10 billion more is being planned to ship over. I believe Yellen came out yesterday, Janet Yellen, right, and said that 10 billion more. So someone has told me a week ago that the US so far has sent 113 billion. It's far more than what the media is doing, but they listed it all out. And I'm going, yeah, that sounds about right, between the cash and the military. And you should see the one LinkedIn article I had that lays out the State Department, that lists out all of the military. It's a huge list, all of the military equipment. And that's not the money, that's just the military equipment. So Biden is promising Zelensky billions more dollars while actively denying an environmental disaster, probably the biggest environmental disaster in the history of the United States.
Right.
I'm not exaggerating here. I know I have a tendency to exaggerate for, writing purposes, just to poke people a little bit. My view is this is probably going to turn out to be one of the worst environmental disasters in the United States. Initially, the United States government, federal government, for 2 weeks blocked and banned any significant federal aid. And it's only when Trump went there in person that the Biden administration changed their mind and said, okay, we're going to give you federal aid, because the optics in the media, which they wouldn't be able to ignore, of Trump going there and just eviscerating Biden for not helping, the Biden administration for not helping, would just be unacceptable optics for the mainstream media. So that's when they finally relented. So whether you like or hate Trump, I kind of both to him. He's a deeply flawed character, but I appreciate what he was trying to do. And let me just throw in here what we discussed. You can edit this out later if you want. I view Trump and Putin in much the same light. They're doing what presidents are supposed to be doing, which is looking after the citizens of their country,
Exactly.
first and foremost.
And you and I both agree, Putin is a bad man, but he is to be respected from the standpoint of taking care of his
country, his citizens. Yes, I don't like his methods. I'm not saying I'm just not. But if you look at the history of world leaders, proper world leaders are ones that actually take care of their citizens first and screw the rest of the world.
And if the UN wants to ban you, or Schwab hates you, tells me you might be on the right path.
Agreed.
But I just interviewed real quick. I just interviewed a doctor about this Palestine, and he is a phenomenal doctor. And he said very much what you just said. It is going to be if not the biggest ecological disaster in the U.S. history for now. So, well, Tom, you just made my day, and that we're filming this on a Saturday, and you just really made my day. So thank you, Tom. And I just really appreciate your industry thought leadership. And I'm going to see if we can't get you to how many millions?
3 million.
3 million. We got to get you that 3 million. So, we got to have some real serious interaction on this one, at least. If I can get you at least halfway there, we're going to be all right, right?
Cool. Thanks. Appreciate it. And it has been a blast talking to you. And our pregame chat was even more interesting, but let's not go down that road. That it just frustrate people.
Thank you. Have a great day. Appreciate you.
Okay, you too.